Welcome to Fuel Up Classic, and in this video I'm going to be featuring a car that you may love and you may hate. There really seems to be no in between with these cars. It's the MG TF, and it is quite simply the cheapest way to get into a two-seater fun sports car. But it's a car that's always had a bit of a checkered reputation. So I'll be trying to discover whether that reputation is deserved or whether these could actually be a fun little car to buy and own and enjoy. I'll be talking to you about how it drives, how it feels, and also what you should look out for, and crucially what you should expect to pay as well if you're thinking about getting behind the wheel of an MG TF or indeed its predecessor, an MGF. This is a little bit of a trip down memory lane for me, because my very first car at the age of 17 that I could legally drive was an MGF, and I paid £1,000 for it, and it cost a lot more than that to insure it, so I didn't have it for very long. But I'm really keen to see how the TF differs. I've got fond memories of that MGF, and everyone tells me that the TF is a better car. So it's only right that we get it out on some really good open country roads and just see what this little bargain British sports car is all about. A lot of people forget that the MG TF was Britain's best-selling two-seater sports car for a number of years. Production started in 2002. It took over from the MGF, but it really was, although they share a lot of similarities, it was a very updated car. Production ceased in 2005 with the demise of MG Rover, but as is the strange way with most British cars, it then resurfaced again in 2007, this time with MG Rover under Chinese company ownership. Those cars are really quite collectible and they're quite unique in themselves. So don't think that all TFs are the same. But this car is a 2004, built by MG Rover. But the TF really did move the game on. The most important factor with the TF is they ditched the old Hydrogas suspension in favour of a coil spring and damper setup. It's simpler, it's more effective, and it's almost completely maintenance free. The only thing I would say is the ride is a little bit hard. It's a little bit bouncy as well, but it's not that bad, and we have to keep relaying back that this is a cheap two-seater fun sports car. So you could take this out at the weekend and have a bit of a B-road blast with it, which I have to say it does very well. It's so nice to be in a car that is the right size for British roads. You can place it wherever you want. That mid-engine layout does allow for really quite fun driving actually. It never feels obviously heavy at the front, it doesn't understeer. The only thing to be cautious of, and it happened to me when I was about 17, and obviously I was driving like an idiot, but mid-engine layout, wet roads, they can catch you out, especially with a short wheelbase car like these. But for the vast majority of spirited driving, it does it really well. And people take these cars on long journeys as well, European tours up to Scotland and back, and they're actually much more refined than you think. And remember, you can have a hard top as well, which makes it an all year round practical car, no matter what the weather. When it comes to engine and transmission options in the TF, it's really simple. They were all powered by the K-Series engine, and yes, we'll talk about the head gasket situation a little bit later in the video. But it came in either 1.6 or 1.8 format. You could have an automatic gearbox, so CVT automated gearbox, not the nicest thing in the world. vast majority of them will be this 5-speed manual, which is really quite slick and precise. It's a pleasure to use. It's quite short shifts, but it engages gear nicely and it's pleasant. Engine-wise, all you need to know is the 1.8 VVC, that stands for variable valve control. That engine produces 160 brake horsepower. That was the most powerful TF you could buy. The 1.6 was somewhere around 115 brake horsepower, and this car is the 1.8, but it slots almost perfectly in the middle. It was by far the most popular option of the time as well. Produces 135 brake horsepower, 5-speed manual gearbox, and as you'd expect, that little K-Series engine really loves to rev. Now, the K-Series engine gets a bit of a bad reputation, but it's a really flexible, fun engine, and you can produce some pretty impressive power output from this as well. But this being the standard 135 brake horsepower model, it's by far the most common example, so you might find yourself looking at one of these. And performance-wise, well, let's just try it out and see. We're doing 30 miles an hour, third gear, foot to the floor, and it picks up really quite nicely. And it will rev all the way to nearly 7,000 RPM. And the one with the variable valve control, well, that will come alive even more at the higher rev range. So it's a lot of fun. And let's not forget, this engine was fitted in the Series 1 Lotus Elise as well. So it's got a bit of motorsport pedigree behind it. It's not a bad engine, you've just got to look after it. And it provides a lot of smiles for not a lot of money. So there's one big thing we need to talk about, and it is of course the head gasket. It's an issue with these cars that has plagued them right from the start, and it's a bit of an unfair reputation really. Not every single head gasket with these cars goes, but it is fair to say that the majority of them would have been replaced by now. And it's no longer such a big issue. Access in that mid-engine layout is tight, but there's a number of specialists that will take care of it for you, and you only need to budget around £400 to £500 these days to have an upgraded head gasket fitted, and you should never have the problem again. There's a number of other upgrades you can do to the cooling system on this car, such as stainless steel coolant pipes that run under the car. It's a known issue that they do corrode after what is essentially now a 20-year-old car. So cheap and easy fix is stainless steel pipes, good quality coolant. Make sure that the engine is warmed up each time you use it before you rev it, and you should not have any issues. So let's get that potential issue out the way. Don't let it put you off buying an F or a TF. And as you say, if the worst happens, well, it's a small bill to pay for what is still a very cheap, fun sports car. So there are a few other things to look out for if you're thinking about buying a TF. Now, the earliest examples are 20 years old, so corrosion is an issue, and they all tend to go around the same sort of places. The bottom of the front wings, the sills are a known trap, really. They trap moisture and dirt in there and start to rot. Panels are all available, but obviously if you start to pay somebody to restore one of these cars, well, it's going to cost a lot more than buying a good example in the first place. But corrosion is a big issue with them. Subframes can rot out as well. Ideally, if you are thinking about buying one, speak to a specialist like the MG Owners Club, who can carry out an independent inspection on the car and give you a full report, or at the very least take someone with you that knows what they're doing, and if you can get the car up in the air, have a good prod around, because corrosion will kill one of these cars off. A few other things to consider: the engine has got a timing belt. If there's no evidence in the history that it's been done very recently, budget having that done. It's around £300 to have it done at a reputable garage, so not the end of the world, and it's a lot cheaper than a new engine should that belt snap. Apart from that, you want to be looking, as I've mentioned, at those stainless steel upgrades on the coolant pipes. Do weekly checks on the coolant level to eradicate that potential head gasket issue. And apart from that, there's very little else that can go wrong with one of these cars. They're relatively simple. So the MG TF did receive quite a hefty styling upgrade over the F. It looks a little bit more purposeful. This car is just sitting on standard wheels, but the later versions as well had quite impressive styling, and they had lovely wheels on them. You could have body kits and stainless steel exhausts and things like that. And I still think, you know, 20 years on, it's a pretty looking car. And inside, well, it's MG Rover, so it's a mixed match of fairly dark, cheap feeling plastics, but again, there's a number of very cheap upgrades you can buy for the cabin to lift it. But this car is completely standard, so it is a bit of a sea of grey and black in here. But having said that, it feels well screwed together, it's not rattling, there's very little scuttle shake, which I'm surprised about. I expected it might have quite a lot of that, but it feels very well put together, this car, and it feels quite planted on the road. The only criticism I do have of the driving experience is the steering is incredibly light. It's very over-assisted, so you don't get that really nice analog feel. You don't get a lot of feeling back through the steering, and the brakes leave a lot to be desired. Braking technology has moved on, but the great thing about an MG of any description is they are so well supported, and there are a huge amount of upgrades you can buy for these cars to turn them into really fun little sports cars. You can upgrade the brakes, upgrade the suspension, you can have performance upgrades, and it's all relatively cheap as well. There's a number of great clubs, the MG Owners Club being a fantastic support network from those guys, and they'll help you keep one of these on the road and tell you all the ways to get the very best out of your TF. So the MG TF is a simple car, so it makes sense to keep things simple with this video. And as already mentioned, a few of the dark clouds that hang over the head of this car, such as the head gasket, such as reliability and build quality issues, I've kind of addressed. They're no longer huge issues. And we always have to go back to the fact that these cars are very, very cheap now. You can get into a road legal MG TF for about £1,500. Now, if you can think of another mid-engined sports car that offers that kind of level of fun for that little money, let me know in the comments below, because I'm not sure that there's another one that exists. And don't forget that this car outsold the MX5 in its day, outsold the MR2. I'm not saying it's a better car than both of those, but it can't have been all that bad if all those people bought them. And also, with it being so cheap, and expect to pay anywhere from, as I've said, £1,500 for a running example that might need a bit of TLC, all the way up to probably £4,000–5,000 for the very best examples. And then those last LE500 cars, well, they're in a slightly different league and they're really quite sought after. You might expect to pay £7,000–8,000 for the very best version of those, being a 2011, something like that, edition. So still very much affordable, very well supported. But let's talk about the vast majority of these cars being £2,000–3,000. They have to go up in value. They've been so cheap for so long that this might just be a car that you can buy and enjoy very cheaply, and at the very least you'll get your money back, but you might even make a little bit, because there's less and less of these cars on the road now, and only good ones are surviving. So that means, really, if history tells us with other makes and models, values will start to climb. So to recap, would I buy an MGTF over a Mazda MX5 or perhaps a Toyota MR2? Do you know, I think I might. There's something that's really quite charming about it. It's got a bit of character. That mid-engine layout is kind of fun. And we have to always go back to how cheap they are. There's nothing cheaper that offers this much fun with the roof down on a sunny day. And it doesn't matter whether you're driving a £50,000 car or a £1,500 car on a sunny day, because all you really want to do is take the roof down and just enjoy the drive. So it's a bargain. It's a bargain. You don't need to be too scared of some of the horror stories that come with the F and the TF. It could even be a bit of a shrewd investment to buy a really good one of these. Keep hold of it, enjoy it, look after it, and you may even see the value of it rise. And arguably, there's not another car out there, certainly at this price point, that's so well supported in terms of parts, cheap and plentiful, really good club support. You can do anything with this car and be around fellow enthusiasts if you want to as well. It's certainly not a car that does everything really well, and there are parts of it where you can see it was built down to a price, but it's a cheap car now and we can forgive it for a plasticky interior or perhaps being ever so slightly dull inside. It doesn't matter. It's just about enjoying it for the price point that this car is. And I think it's a bit of a bargain. Let me know in the comments below what you think, or if you were thinking about spending a couple of £1,000 on a sports car, what would you buy instead and why? But this particular car has done 42,000 miles. It's still on that original head gasket. It's an absolute mint example, and it's up for £3,700. So very obtainable, very cheap, and lots of fun.